it really does. When you see how high the stakes are, it's like it gives you a whole nother level of appreciation for how criminal Russiagate was. You know what I mean? Like it's very easy for us to always like stop at the level of the intelligence agencies tried to frame the duly elected president of the United States of America for treason. Because really, do you, like, when you say that out loud, do you need to go further than that? Like, that seems to be enough. That seems to be more than enough for this to be like one of the greatest outrages in the history of the United States of America, right? But it's actually quite a bit worse than that, because it was actually intentionally being used to prevent Donald Trump from pursuing his policy agenda, which was to get along with the country with the biggest stockpile of nuclear weapons in the history of the world. And they intentionally thwarted that. And that has already resulted in a war where hundreds of thousands, perhaps well over 1 million people have died. So like, it's just like, as you think about that, it really is, it gives you a whole new feeling, even though, listen, I know the administration is already a failed administration. I know that they're probably not going to deliver on 10% of the good things that they promised, but like, and I know that they're pivoting away from the Epstein cover up, but it did just leave me with another thing of like, man, those people who did Russiagate really need to pay. Like, they really do need to be held to account to that. It's just it's hard to overstate what a profound crime that was. I don't know. It was kind of interesting to see the two of them together after all these years. Now, for people who don't remember, Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump did meet in Helsinki back in what I believe was 2018. And the huge controversy back then, Rob, right, was that Donald Trump said that he believed Vladimir Putin because all the questions were about him interfering in the 2016 election. And Vladimir Putin was like, I didn't interfere in the 2016 election. And then they asked Trump, they said, he's saying he didn't interfere in the election. Do you believe him? And he goes, I believe him. He tells me he wasn't involved in that. I believe him. And this is what the entire corporate media tried to spin as treason by Donald Trump, because he dared to say that he trusted Vladimir Putin over his own intelligence agencies. And it is, with all of the evidence that's come out since that time, and even the most recent stuff that Tulsi Gabbard's been releasing, it is something to think about the fact that, like, Donald Trump ran in 2016 on détente with Russia. He explicitly ran on getting along with Russia and not moving in this, more and more hostile direction. And then when he tried to do it in 2018, they all accused him of treason for this thing that we've now learned that they completely made up and planted and used just for this purpose. I mean, for a few purposes, but this was one of the major ones, to prevent the democratically elected president of the United States of America from enacting the policy that he ran on, that the American people supported, to enact his policy with regard to getting along with the biggest nuclear power in the history of the world. It's just that's a crazy story to then see it all come to. At least they're in the same room, and at least there's talk of trying to end the bloodshed and trying to reach some type of deal. So I don't know. I was just thinking about a lot of those things, like all about Russiagate, and it really does. When you see how high the stakes are, it's like it gives you a whole nother level of appreciation for how criminal Russiagate was. You know what I mean? Like it's very easy for us to always like stop at the level of the intelligence agencies tried to frame the duly elected president of the United States of America for treason. Because really, when you say that out loud, do you need to go further than that? Like, that seems to be enough. That seems to be more than enough for this to be like one of the greatest outrages in the history of the United States of America, right? But it's actually quite a bit worse than that, because it was actually intentionally being used to prevent Donald Trump from pursuing his policy agenda, which was to get along with the country with the biggest stockpile of nuclear weapons in the history of the world. And they intentionally thwarted that. And that has already resulted in a war where hundreds of thousands, perhaps well over 1 million people have died. So like, it's just like, as you think about that, it really is, it gives you a whole new feeling, even though, listen, I know the administration is already a failed administration. I know that they're probably not going to deliver on 10% of the good things that they promised, but like, and I know that they're pivoting away from the Epstein cover up, but it did just leave me with another thing of like, man, those people who did Russiagate really need to pay. Like, they really do need to be held to account to that. It's hard to overstate what a profound crime that was.
Yeah, I guess I never really put that all together, that we could have been moving in a direction of getting along with Russia, which might have made it more difficult for Biden to, pull off the NATO's going into Ukraine and then provoking that war if we were in a better place. So, yeah, that is, I guess, an interesting storyline that lurked in the background there of, the war hawks of the people that are anti-Russia kind of instigating that as far back as 8 years ago.
Oh yeah, and I mean, look, it had a huge effect on it because so much. I mean, look, there's a lot, like there were huge levels of escalation in the hostilities between the U.S. and Russia. I mean, we have a long history of having hostilities with Russia, but saying like post-Soviet Union, like the Clinton had the first round of NATO expansion, and that was a huge deal. George W. Bush had the dual use rockets put into Poland. That was a huge provocation. Like he got us out of a couple of different really important treaties. Like there were steps each way, but this disaster, like this catastrophic war, the story of that really starts under Obama in 2014, and backing the Maidan Revolution, recognizing the government that overthrew the democratically elected Yanukovych government. Like all of that stuff was real. That's when the actual war in Ukraine started, right? Like there was a Western-backed coup. Then there was while the money was flowing in, there was fighting on the street. There was this huge clash. The government's overthrown, and then immediately after the new government comes in, there was a civil war between the east and west of the country, and that went on for years after that. I think something like 15,000 people died in that war. The numbers now pale in comparison to since Vladimir Putin invaded, but at the time, this was a big deal. And Vladimir Putin did send essentially special forces in back then. I think in 2015, maybe he sent them in. And in 2014, after the coup was done, he annexed Crimea. So like this is when the whole thing starts happening. And so it's in this context, right? It's in 2014 that the government in Ukraine is overthrown and it's backed by Obama and Joe Biden, and then Vladimir Putin annexes Crimea. This is in 2014. In 2015 and 16, the civil war is going on. That's when Donald Trump comes in, right? Donald Trump comes in the middle of like there's this civil war in Ukraine over U.S. intervention, U.S. European intervention in the region. There's this conflict there. And the guy who gets elected was running on like, let's de-escalate. Let's have détente. Let's be friends. Now, he was more, when they were running, they were talking about what was going on in Syria, but all this shit was going on too. And so to frame, because Russiagate was like a double frame job. It was, they framed both Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. They framed Vladimir Putin for overthrowing our elections, and they framed Donald Trump for being involved in the conspiracy to do it. But it was all bullshit. None of that was real. And so, yeah, then you had essentially Donald Trump, and particularly after Helsinki, I mean, the amount of pressure that they impeached him over Ukraine. Right? Like it was an enormous pressure campaign. And what was the thing that they impeached him over? Right now, this was later, but the thing they impeached him over that was such a big deal is that he threatened to hold up weapons shipments into Ukraine while this civil war was going on. Now, he ultimately gave in and did that and sent the weapons in. But that's kind of what Russiagate created. It created this environment where Donald Trump, because he's Trump, and he's not like, he never had the intelligence or the creativity to be like, to actually pull off a 4D chess move. You know what I mean? So it would never be like, because like an actual 4D chess or someone who was actually smart enough and like clever enough to like rise above the thing and go like, oh, here, like he could have had, you know, I don't know. He could have made it. He could have shouted from the loudest bullhorn during all of that Russiagate stuff. He could have used Aaron Mate in the Nation magazine, completely debunking the whole thing. Like the biggest left-wing publication with this left-wing journalist has completely debunked Russiagate, but he never even thought to bring that up because he doesn't read and he doesn't know. He had no idea that it had been debunked in the Nation. You know what I mean? Just like, and so. Instead, the problem is that Donald Trump isn't actually this like master manipulator negotiator who's always playing 4D chess. And so what Donald Trump did instead, in very Trumpian fashion, was he goes, oh, they say I'm a puppet of Vladimir Putin. I'm going to show them what a Putin puppet I'm not. I'm going to send weapons into Ukraine and put sanctions on Russia. And then if you remember, Rob, he used to brag about this. You know, they say I'm a puppet of Vladimir Putin, but no one's been harsher on Vladimir Putin. That's Donald Trump's 4D chess. That's what he actually gets, is to be like, oh, yeah, MSNBC? Well, just to prove you wrong, I'll do exactly what you want. And so that's where the thing escalates. And then, of course, Joe Biden comes back in, Vladimir Putin invades, and the rest is history.